Alright, yeah, how's it going, guys? And welcome on in. So, today I want to do something a little bit different, something that I've not really done before in the past, and if you guys like this idea, then be sure to let me know down in the comment section any kind of support on this kind of video. Basically encourages me to do this more often. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this particular video, I want to mention that I am currently using the public Discord as well to display all of these spoilers. So if you do go down into the description below, you'll see a link to my Discord. So if you want live spoilers as and when I spot them, or maybe someone in chat spots them, it's a great place to go and discuss this kind of thing as well. I'm happy to hear all of your guys' input on these cards. Maybe I forget something. It's really good for me to hear your guys' opinions on the playability of some of these cards, because, you know, you can always miss something later down the line, and I want to be as informative as I possibly can with this kind of video. But yes, without further ado, let's get back into it, shall we? So what I want to do today is actually discuss some of the spoilers that have come out of Ravnica Allegiances. So we weren't supposed to actually get any spoilers until January 2nd, but a fair few have just spewed out from the cracks today, and we've had a few other little bits of information that I actually want to discuss today. These are probably going to be a weekly series, although depending on how fast all of the cards end up being spewed out, then I might actually make a video between that period as well. So, without further ado, let's get into the spoilers, shall we? The first one that we've got is Gate Colossus. Gate Colossus is an 8-mana 8/8 artifact creature construct, and it says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each gate you control, and Gate Colossus can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Pretty good. And when a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you may put Gate Colossus from your graveyard on the top of your library. So this one's kind of an interesting one. It's more of the Gate Matters synergies. For those who don't know, the guild gates are kind of the Ravnica thing. They are tapped lands that are pretty bad on their own, but we're getting a lot of Gate Matters cards, similar to the Gargoyle in Guilds of Ravnica, as well as Guild Summit. We've had that one as well. There's a few payoff cards for gates right now. I'm not entirely sure that they are where they need to be right now in terms of a tier deck. I don't think gates will ever be a tier 1 deck unless maybe Maze's End comes out and we get a load of fogs or something like that. But Gate Colossus does have some interesting potential. If you do get 8 gates in play, then he's a free 8/8. So there is a lot of stuff you could do in terms of combos for casting free creature spells. Like, this guy is historic, so you can cast him for free to unlock a Traxos or something of that sort. There are also synergies with historic as well. So casting historic spells allows you to do things in the case of that bird angel thing. Can't remember. I'll put the cards that I'm mentioning up on the sides here so that we can keep ourselves informed. But for the moment, I don't think that this guy is particularly useful. The only combo that I can think of off the top of my head that Gate Colossus is useful in is the Arcane Adaptation Liliana combo. So Liliana, her ultimate says you can cast zombies from your graveyard this turn, and if you use Arcane Adaptation, you change the converted mana cost of creatures. Not the converted mana cost, sorry, the creature type of creatures. So you could turn Gate Colossus into a zombie and allow you to play Gate Colossus from your graveyard for free, essentially. Now, I don't know why you would do that, because Chamber Sentry would allow you to do the similar situation. It's kind of a weird one with Gate Colossus. I'm not entirely sure that it's going to see too much play, but if gates ever become a thing, because Amulet of Vigor gets a reprint or something like that, that's something that we really need for gates to actually be relevant, I think, in the standard format, at least as a constructed and not memey deck. Nothing wrong with memes, of course. Moving on, we've got Lavinia Azureus Renegade. So he's an interesting one. White and a blue for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier. The human is very important here. It says each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So as far as standard is concerned, without seeing the spoilers for the rest of Ravnica Allegiances, I'm not going to say that Lavinia is actually going to see any standard play, to be honest. The first ability to stop creatures with greater than the number of lands you control from being cast. The only application currently that I can think of is if your opponent's playing a ramp deck with Gifts of Paradise, because that would allow them to ramp a little bit ahead, and Lavinia in that case would stop them. The humans side, though, is very important, I think, in terms of modern play, and maybe even Legacy and Vintage as well. This does have a lot of play in non-standard formats, so I wouldn't be too excited to open this one in a pack in Arena, but any other format, this is probably a pretty good card. So as far as the first ability in terms of modern and older formats, the non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls, it's really good at killing Tron. You've heard Tron Killer quite a few times, I'm sure, but Tron lands are essentially a group of 3 lands that say when you have all 3 of them together, you generate 7 mana, and that allows you in Modern to play things like Karn Liberated, and Karn Liberated for 3 mana doesn't sound like all that bad of an idea, right? So Lavinia really helps with that stuff, and we'll probably see this in humans in terms of the sideboard. I'm not sure if it'll make the main deck just because it is quite conditional, but sideboard tech you might see 1 or 2 of these. It stops your opponent playing turn 3 Karns, which I'm not sure if humans really has a problem with as a whole. I'm sure they could probably keep up with it because humans really doesn't need any more support, but it's one of those things that you can't really help but print humans in Magic these days, so who knows, we might actually see humans getting a ban, or maybe even just humans steamrolling for a little while. As far as opponents casting spells with no mana cost as well, that actually stops like Pact of Negations and things like that, which I think Ad Nauseam runs. In terms of Legacy, that's Lion's Eye Diamonds. It's also... if no mana was spent, yeah, Force of Will. It would stop people from being able to Force of Will you in Legacy, which is, I think, like 50% of the format runs Force of Wills as a 4-of in their decks, so it stops you from countering spells as far as that's concerned, so that's going to be an interesting thing to do. I'm not sure what blue-white deck would actually want that, but I'm not much of a Legacy player. I just know that there is a fair amount that Lavinia will stop. Also, like Lotus Petals and things like that, but I imagine most decks, I think Reanimator runs Lotus Petals, they'd probably be dropping them down before Lavinia came down anyway, but there you go. So, not much standard play probably from Lavinia, but as far as the future format, the older formats is concerned, this one probably might actually rack up a little bit of a price, so opening this in paper might not be too terrible. Moving on, we have Rafter Demon. Rafter Demon. This is probably more like the Phantom of the Opera, but this is a 2 black and a red for a 4/2 creature demon. A 4-mana 4/2 is a bit meh, to be honest, but there is a Spectacle cost, and this is actually one of the new mechanics from the newest set. Spectacle is Rakdos' flagship mechanic, essentially. It says you may cast this spell for its Spectacle cost, rather than its mana cost, if an opponent lost life this turn, which is kind of easy to pull off. You know, you use things like Shock and Lightning Strikes. Most of red is burn related anyway, and even black does have ways of making you lose life as well. There's a few vampires that do it when they enter the battlefield, as well as the black burn spell that's essentially Lightning Helix in black. Its name escapes me, but it's on screen, so no worries there. But anyway, the Spectacle is an alternative converted mana cost, an alternative casting cost, you might say. So when Rafter Demon enters the battlefield, if its Spectacle cost was paid, each opponent discards a card. So it's a 5-mana 4/2 that would make your opponent discard a card. I don't think this is ever going to see any kind of play. I'm not even sure if it's very useful in draft. This is kind of, I think this is a bit of a throwaway card, to be honest. I'm not too excited about this card in particular. There are a few Spectacle cards, though, that I can see being constructed playable, but I don't think this is ever going to be one of them. It's an interesting idea, though. I do like the idea of it, but yeah. Rafter Demon is not going to see much play, I don't think, anywhere. It just dies to too much as well. Now, as far as Spectacle cards that could see some play, we have Rixmardy Reveler, a 2-mana 2/2 creature human shaman Its creature type's probably irrelevant, to be honest. But it has Spectacle of 4, so 2 black and a red for this one. As I mentioned, if they take damage, you can cast it for this spell. When it enters the battlefield, you discard a card, then draw a card. So it has a loot effect on 2 mana, which is kind of useful. If you need to fill up your graveyard, it's good for maybe potentially a reanimator kind of strategy. I don't know. There's not really much to reanimate in the format these days, so unless we see something coming out of Rackdos or Gruul that's like really stupidly good early game, I don't know if reanimator would really be a thing, but I imagine the Reveler is a good way to go about it. What I do see this as instead though is probably putting this maybe in a burn deck, because when you pay its Spectacle cost, you, instead of discarding a card and drawing a card, you actually discard your hand and then draw 3 cards, which is Bedlam Reveler in a nutshell, and that card saw a fair bit of play, and it still sees some modern play as well. I don't think this card is going to actually dethrone Reveler in terms of modern, because you have to use the 4 mana Spectacle, and Reveler can be 2 mana later down the line, but I think in terms of standard, this could see a little bit of play here and there in terms of black-red burn. There's a fair few cards that will enable it, and the fact that it actually just refills your hand as well. It's basically like Risk Factor in that sense, but the opponent doesn't really get the chance and it doesn't deal the damage, but refilling your hand is super powerful for a burn deck. Putting a 2/2 body on the board isn't too amazing, but I think it actually could see a little bit of play, and it doesn't require anything beyond just losing life in order to enable it, so we could see some play with Rixmadi Reveler. I'm not convinced it's going to be tier 1 by any standards, but we'll have to see what comes out of the rest of Ravnica Allegiances. If there's an enabler for Spectacle, say something like an anti-Fountain of Renewal that would deal damage on upkeep or something like that, something like Sulfuric Vortex, anything of that nature, then this is pretty good. It should also be noted as well that Spectacle will trigger when your opponent plays a shock land. So at the moment we haven't actually seen any instant speed Spectacle cards yet, but I'd imagine that if we do see one, that they will actually be fairly powerful in the format. I imagine they'll probably get nerfed, to be honest, in terms of card design. Because if your opponent shocks in a land, they've lost life this turn, which means the Spectacle cost is the new casting cost, which is insane. So you could maybe, if you could give these creatures flash, you could do something fun with that. But most of the time, I imagine that the instant speed Spectacle cards are the ones that are going to see the most play, should they actually be powerful enough. It's probably going to be the case that one is powerful and the rest are underwhelming, like they usually do with most cards. Moving on, we have Simek Ascendancy. This is one of my favourite cards from the set, because I just really love alternative win conditions. So, Simek Ascendancy is a green and a blue enchantment that has the ability to pay 1 a green and a blue to put a counter on a creature you control. It also says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simek Ascendancy. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Simek Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. So, this is basically a deck built around counters, and it's a good reason for anybody who likes Simek decks to probably invest some rare wildcards into Hadama's Climb. I expect, because this card has been spoiled, that we will get a counters matter strategy for Simek. Historically, Simek has always been around counters. We've had Evolve and things like that in the past, so Simek Ascendancy just suggests to me that we'll probably get that kind of stuff anyway. I think what you might expect to see if Simek does become powerful is probably a Bant counters list. Whether or not Simek Ascendancy sees any play in that is yet to be decided, but a Bant counters list is pretty good, because we have Venerated Loxodon, who convokes and puts counters on things, which is really super powerful, currently seeing play in token strategies. Then we also have the Knight as well, that also has the opportunity to put 2 counters on herself. She's really powerful as well, being a modal creature. There's a lot to do there, so there is a lot of suggestion for a Bant tokens list. You could even go with the new, there is a Shaman, I think it is, it's Construct, that gets counters when multicolored cards are cast, so we could even see that card coming out. I don't think it would ever be tier 1, but it would actually be a reasonably powerful list, I would imagine, if Simek sees enough +1/+1 counter synergy. As far as Simek Ascendancy is concerned, though, I don't think you'll see this very often, though as I mentioned, like Venerated Loxodon is able to put on a lot of counters in one go, so something like a March of the Multitudes into a Loxodon is going to put on 5 counters to Simek Ascendancy, which puts you a quarter of the way there to your victory condition, which is not terrible. I believe there's also a combo in Standard as well that does allow you to put infinite counters on a creature, so we could see maybe that working as well. It's one of the dinos that when it's dealt damage, it puts 2 counters on itself, so if you can repeat 1 damage on it, then you can do it that way. It's a very, very roundabout way though, so I'm not sure we'll be seeing that, but I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for something to do with this card because I am super excited to work around it. It's kind of my 1000-year storm of the newest set currently. Moving on, we have the Haunt of Hightower. So this is the Buyer Box promo, I believe, which basically means that you won't be opening it from Ravnica Allegiance packs, but if you do buy the 90-pack bundles from Arena, or you buy a booster box yourself in paper, then you'll get a copy or 2 of these ones. 1 copy if you're playing in paper, and 2 from the 90 pack, and I think the 45 gives you 1 copy as well. But other than that, you're not going to be really seeing this card all that much, which is fair enough, because I don't think it's the most powerful card. It's certainly no Nexus of Fate, so there is that to keep in mind. But anyway, let's have a look at it, shall we? 4 and double black for a 6-mana 3/3 legendary flying life-linking vampire, which is an interesting combination of things. When the Haunt of Hightower attacks, defending player discards a card. When a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a 1/1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. So, the way I see this card actually being used is something along the lines of Rackdos midrange, perhaps, maybe as a 2-of. I would never run too many of these because it is a 6-mana 3/3 that does nothing on its face. However, if it does survive, it can do some pretty fun stuff. Now, Rackdos midrange at the moment has quite a few things. It's very top-end heavy, but I think a Haunt of Hightower could do some fun stuff there. We have Angrath in the 5-drop slot that allows you to discard cards, so if you played the Haunt on 6, then ticked up Angrath, you would immediately put it as a 4/4, which would mean that it would survive a lot of stuff. At the moment, though, it's going to be a little bit difficult because the format does contain things like Ixalan's Bindings, Lightning Strikes, Lava Coils. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get the Haunt to survive, but if your opponent's on top decks because you've been forcing them to discard, which, as the spectacle cards we've seen so far might actually support, it might be a little bit difficult for our opponent to actually deal with the Haunt of Hightower immediately. So we could see some use there. It kind of looks like a really underpowered Kalitas in its weird way, but it should also be noted that it says a card is put into its opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a 1/1 counter on it. So I think in response to the Lightning Strike, I could be wrong, but I think the card Lightning Strike resolves into the graveyard, so this trigger is on the stack. I'm not sure how that works in terms of the Haunt surviving that. Let me know in the comment section below if you are up on the rules. I'll have to look that one up myself, but it does say a card put anywhere. So that's a creature dying, that's your opponent's deck being milled, that's your opponent discarding a card. It's basically most stuff. As long as it hits the graveyard, then you're getting a counter on this guy, which is why I think he's actually a little bit underrated, and we could see maybe 1 or 2 cards being played from him, but we'll have to see on that one. Moving on, we have Rackdos Firewheeler. So this is another from the XXY mana cost cards. We've had Golgari Finebroker, we've had our wonderful True Fire Captain, but we've got Rackdos Firewheeler as our Rakdos equivalent of those. So it's a 4-mana 4/3, which is reasonable. However, the 3 is a bit meh. The reason why Finebroker is so good, I think, is because he has the 4 toughness. I would prefer it be swapped around, but that's not a really Rakdos thing to do. So, in terms of actual card design, I think this pretty much fits Rakdos in a nutshell. But anyway, When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to a target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 creature or planeswalker. So this is actually a 4-mana 4/3 that distributes 4 damage around the board. This would actually trigger Spectacle if you had the mana, though I would doubt that you would, just because of the hard to cast mana here, and the fact that it's 4 mana as well is kind of difficult to combo it with other 4 mana spells. It's pretty late game to expect that kind of thing, but something to keep in mind all the same. But distributing 4 damage is pretty reasonable for a 4 mana spell that puts 4 power onto the board. It's probably a good reason why this is a 3 toughness as well, because it won't survive most of the removal, because if it did, I think this card would be broken. As it stands though, I think it could see a little bit of play, maybe in Punisher Burn, but we'll have to see on that one. We then have Growth Spiral. So these are, I should mention, these are the F&M promos, I believe. So if you go to your F&M, you could open these one up in pre-release, I think. Something along that line. But anyway, Growth Spiral, Simek, green, blue, instant speed. It says draw a card, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So the one use that I can think about with this one, it is a nice little cantrip as well. I could see some use in terms of, if you're a Thelona fan, there's a lot of amulet cantrips that could be very useful, and this one might actually be one. It's a 2-mana ramp spell that draws you a card, which is quite powerful. The way I would probably use this one, though, is in a lands deck, because we do have a lot of lands matters cards, like Sylvan Awakening. We have Tachiovas, things like that. So being able to ramp up and basically just get to where we need to go super quick. I think Growth Spiral will see a fair bit of play. I don't think it'll be tier 1 though. We'll have to see if any more lands matters cards end up being played, but it's kind of conditional as well, it should be noted. You do need the land in hand, but if you're playing something like Bantlands, which is a deck that I've played in the past, and after I've seen Growth Spiral, I definitely plan on playing it in the future, and this deck is probably going to enjoy this card. We could see a little bit of an improvement in that kind of list. I really do like the additional land drop though. This is like a 2-mana put you to 4. So what could you do in 4 immediately the turn after? I'm not quite sure on that one. Probably can't, so you could take up and get some more lands. Let me know what you would do on turn 4 in a Bantlands list. It's escaping me right now as to what the powerful play would be to follow up after this. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing anyway, because I think this card is powerful on its own, and not just as a ramp enabler. Moving on, we've got Mortify. So Mortify is a 1 white and a black, instant speed, destroy target creature or enchantment. I do like this card. I've been talking about Mortify quite a lot recently in streams and things like that, because black-white control is one of my more anticipated decks to come out of Ravnica Allegiances. I really think that they're going to get some decent pieces, because we already know that Kaya is getting a Planeswalker for the new Ravnica. We don't know what she looks like yet, but Kaya Ghost Council, or Ghost Assassin, I think she was called, something like that. She was from Conspiracy. She was quite powerful. She sees a fair bit of commander play, I believe. But she does a lot of fun stuff. Even if we just got a reprint of that Kaya, I would be happy. But yeah, I think that black-white control could see some buffs in this newest set, and Mortify might be one of them. My black-white control list that I run is very creature-focused, and the one thing that it can't really deal with, or it has a tough time engaging with, is actually enchantments. Because we run Cleansing Novas to deal with creatures. However, the main win condition of that deck is by using artifacts in terms of constructs and treasures, and also using Dawn of Hope and the Fountain of Renewal. So we can't really use Cleansing Nova to destroy enchantments, which is where Mortify comes in. It really fills in that gap where we actually can't use Cleansing Nova's side ability. So I might see this as a 1 or 2 of in a Orzhov control list. I don't think it'll see much play outside of that deck, though. It's basically just a slightly better murder. And to be honest, you mostly want to be playing Vraska's Contempt. That's going to be the main thing. The 4-drop slot for Vraska's Contempt is just much more powerful. If this hit a Planeswalker, I'd be all over it, but it doesn't really. I'm a little iffy on it. I can see it being a 1 or 2 of in Orzhov control, but for the most part, I don't think it's maybe as powerful as it might look. After that, we've got Light Up the Stage. I really love the art on this one. This one's pretty sweet. Light Up the Stage is a 3-mana sorcery with Spectacle. So Spectacle, as we mentioned before, says if your opponent has lost life, then you get to cast it for its Spectacle cost. So let's look at this as a 1-mana cast and see whether or not it's actually worth playing for that. So casting for 1, we get to exile top 2 cards of our library. Until the end of our turn, you may play those cards. And play is a very, very important word to be used there, because that actually allows you to use lands. Now, when you look at those 2 cards, if one of them is a land, then if it was cast, you'd be really bummed out, because you would only be able to cast the other one. So being able to play the land that you actually hit from Light Up the Stage is really powerful in terms of this card. And if you're running this in burn, you're always going to hit that Spectacle cost. So we look at 2 cards. Hopefully both of them are burn, and we just spend our mana. We've got presumably about 3 mana anyway, so that's 2 Wizard's Lightnings or something like that on turns 3. You've got the mana for it, hopefully, so it's probably going to be a really powerful card. However, it is a little bit conditional. As I mentioned, if you do hit lands, then although you can make the land drop for the turn, if you hit double land, you are getting literally no value from this Light Up the Stage. So you've got to keep that in mind if you are cutting cards from your current burn decks, just to see where it would actually fit in, because you're going to have to cut this for something that deals damage, and this can potentially deal no damage at all and maybe lose you the game. So it has some really nice top end. The ceiling on it is really nice, but the floor does have a little bit of downside. But I'm not sure in burn that's going to be too much of a problem. We might see this once or twice in some burn decks, but I wouldn't imagine this actually warping the format in any sense. Finally, the last card that we've got is Tithetaker. Tithetaker is a 1 and a white 2/1 human soldier that says during your turn, spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast, and abilities your opponents activate cost 1 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. And then it also has Afterlife 1, which is, I think, the Orzhov's new mechanic. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. I personally think this card is superb. So this is a 2-mana 2/1, which is fairly okay. You want to be thinking about running this one, I think, in a aggro list. And the reason you want to be doing that is because it increases the cost of spells for your opponent on your turn. So if you actually manage to resolve a Tithetaker, that's going to increase the cost of all of your opponent's removal spells, increase the opponent's counter spells if they're going to be planning on using them on your turn. So you'll be able to get much more underneath your opponent's spells that way, and basically just goldfish your opponent to death. You know, the control decks really want to be interacting with you in the early game, and if they can't do that, then you're in trouble. But yes, there's a fair amount here. The other part about it that makes me think that this is actually a pretty reasonable aggro card as well is because it has Afterlife 1, which means it creates a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token and replaces itself with an evasive creature. So this is a 2/1 that becomes a 1/1 flyer later down the line. I think that's pretty powerful in terms of beating control lists, because this actually demands a 2-for-1 essentially. The 1/1 isn't terribly impressive, but your opponent, if they're playing control, aren't going to have many flyers, and usually flyers do some serious work as well. So I think Tithetaker will see a little bit of play. It's not the most overpowered thing in the world. I don't know if it will be a 4-of in any aggro list, but we could see this one actually seeing some constructed play. Limited, probably not so much. Modern, probably not so much, to be honest, but standard, it's pretty reasonable. And then the final thing that we've actually got is a confirmation that Dovan Barn is actually going to be a Planeswalker in the final set. So we did know that Kaya and Domri Raid were going to be the Planeswalkers, but I think Dovan has been kind of under the radar as far as the final Planeswalker on the list. So we now know the Azureus Planeswalkers, we know the Gruul Planeswalkers, and the Orzhov Planeswalkers. Now, Dovan Barn, depending on how powerful he is, could mean that Jeskai Control gets a brand new tool, or maybe even just Blue-White Control makes a sweet return, since Teferi is powerful enough on his own. Comboing him with Dovan Barn could be pretty disastrous for anyone who hates control lists. So we'll have to see. The previous Dovan Barn, though, from Kaladesh wasn't the most powerful card in the world anyway. You saw a bit of Super Friends play, but that was really about it. We'll have to see if he's more powerful in this set one. We don't actually know what he's going to be doing. But before, I believe he was kind of a prison planeswalker. I think he locked down... He kind of caused stasis, I think, as part of his ultimate. And then there was a card that allowed him to draw a card. He wasn't too unique in terms of planeswalker abilities, but his ultimate was very stasis-focused, so it taxed your opponent per turn and stopped them from untapping, which is pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. But yes, so that's as far as the spoilers are concerned. We also got a bit of news as well on the Wizards Magic website. So in terms of the spoilers, we got a rundown of all of the spectacle, but we also found out that in the coming days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're actually going to be getting some mechanic spoilers as well. So what I'll probably be doing is going over these at the end of the week once the Friday one's released. But if we do see on Tuesday several cards being spoiled, then you might see another video from me. But for the most part, I think I'm going to wait until Friday, and then we'll actually have a full list of basically the Ravnica Allegiance spoilers coming up. So it's a really good idea to theory craft all of the new decks that might be spawning from this set. So something to keep in mind. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If it was educational, that's very good. Awesome. Thank you for watching all that jazz. But yes, if you have any comments you want to make about any of the spoilers, any potential decks that you might be building them in, any theories that you might expect from the newest mechanics. As I mentioned, I reckon the Simek one's going to be pretty simple. It's probably just going to be counters focused, just based off of the Simek cards that we've seen so far, but who knows? You never know. We might see something pretty cool. I expect maybe Rackdos and Gruul to have a big creature coming out of it, for maybe Reanimator or Ramp, that kind of thing. But who knows? We'll have to see. That's all we know for today, so hopefully you've enjoyed. If you have, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a great deal. Lets me know you want to see these kinds of videos in the future. I'm probably going to do this one for this set, and then if the support is great enough from all of these spoiler videos that I'll make for this brand new set, then I'll probably keep doing this for sets in the future. So the best way to support the channel and make sure that you get these kind of videos back in the future is to do the liking, the subscribing, and the hitting the bells, all that stuff. Sharing the videos if you found this useful and you want to share this news with others. Thanks very much for watching anyway, guys. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.